Hello and welcome everyone to Mental Health Mondays. I'm Angellah Brayshaw.
And I'm Jim Brayshaw, and it's great to be with you on this Mental Health Monday. Today, we're going to talk about depression. This may be our biggest battle.
Yeah, and we know from the World Health Organization that this is the second leading cause of disease for the entire globe.
It is a massive impact on society. And when we hear people's expressions of depression, we find they're quite filled with feeling because it's so serious.
Yeah, it is. So this person's expression of depression was that they were suffering from a desperation, a heavy, severe sensation spreading towards the future, and they felt trapped. They felt like were stuck in it forever. It was like a bubble that went up, burst in their face, and something poisoning their life, a toxic sensation. And they felt the worst part is they felt that it was going to be the same forever.
And that's why they use those descriptors, Ange, like desperation, severe sensation. What else do we got there that they use? It's so telling.
Well, poisoning their life because it did impact every area of their life.
Yeah, and depression is painful, obviously. That's why they felt like it was a trap, right? So the actual body registers it as pain, and the depression itself overshadows the individual's future.
Yeah, because they felt like they were going to be like that forever or experience it forever. So we need to know first, what's the difference between grief and depression? They are different.
Yeah, the difference is grief can be experienced from any loss, but there's a time frame. After how many weeks do usually people's symptoms of grief, unless it's like, I think you talked about it being complicated grief.
Unless it's complicated grief or it's very sudden, it's a sudden loss, then it will last a little bit longer. But knowing the difference that at that 2-week period, if there isn't a change, it could be diagnosed as clinical depression.
I see, and then that overarching cloud just stays with an individual, and it's something that they can't move away from, even though I'm sure they want to. Many times throughout their day-to-day. And the brain is impacted in such a legitimate fashion. There's so many elements in the brain that we'd love to talk about and everything that goes on in there. But we'll talk about the amygdala, the thalamus, and the hippocampus for just a couple moments.
So the amygdala is associated with emotions, anger, pleasure, sorrow, fear. Higher activity happens in the amygdala when sad or depressed.
So that amygdala registers fears easier when I'm experiencing depression. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so the thalamus then, its job is to receive and relay most sensory info to high level. Like this, it registers speech and behaviors. There's movement and thinking and learning. And the thalamus problems may fuel mood disorders because it links sensory input to unpleasant feelings when it typically shouldn't be linking the input to unpleasant feelings.
Yeah, and what happens is the hippocampus registers that fear experience, processing long-term and memory and recollection. So that fear experience can be registered as smaller in depression, but the stress hormones, what do?
Yeah, stress hormones are impairing the nerve cells. Not only is the hippocampus known to be smaller when I have depression, but yeah, I'm inducing more stress hormones, as you said, and the nerve cells, they don't grow as much.
Yeah, and we need that to be healthy. So a clinician will look at these things. We want to look at mild, moderate, and severe depression. And we need to have a cluster of these symptoms, but those symptoms are large. So they may cause, mild depression can cause irritability, anger, hopelessness, feelings of guilt and despair, self-loathing, a loss of interest in activities that person once enjoyed.
You used to enjoy stuff and you no longer enjoy it. And then concentrating at home, at work, in the kitchen, whatever you're doing, even driving, there's a lot of safety risks that go along with depression because we can't concentrate. Motivation drifts down. There's now disinterest in socializing. And just, Anne, speak to that if you don't mind, about the body perceiving it as what? Because we draw away from people.
Well, the body receives it as a threat response, an ancient psychological mechanism that
like
says...
Like an infection?
Yeah, like an infection. When we were infected, our ancestors would back away from our tribal and our tribes and the people we are connected to because they didn't want them to get sick.
Oh, interesting. So the aches and pains might be part of that body responding as if there's an infection and there's seemingly no direct cause to that.
Yeah.
Of course, sleepiness and fatigue. We've all had that, and now it's winter in our part of the world, so we're feeling that more. But then it shifts into insomnia for some. And the last couple of mild signs and symptoms a person might feel?
Appetite changes and weight changes. That's just coping mechanisms sometimes, and sometimes it's the brain saying, I'm no longer hungry. I don't even register hunger.
Oh, that's really hard for those experiencing, and that's the mild category. If that seems to be painting a picture of what you're going through or what someone you love or care about is going through, it's very real for you or for them. And that can lead to moderate depression, which are those signs and symptoms, plus there's problems with self-esteem, reduced productivity. I now feel more worthless, and I have some heightened sensitivities to certain things, and worrying. What happens there?
It becomes excessive, and we'll talk about that later in this segment. So severe depression is classified as having symptoms of mild to moderate depression, but the symptoms are severe. They're noticeable, even to our loved ones who are trying to maybe hide it from us. And they can last an average of 6 months or longer. They can go away after a while, but it also can be recurrent. And that diagnosis is especially crucial because it may even be time sensitive.
It's so serious. It's such a dire place the individual is at. They may be having suicidal ideation. We need to see a medical professional when we're experiencing major depressive disorder or the symptoms from it. We can't emphasize that enough.
Yeah. So the main causes of depression, we know them now, and they are disconnection from meaningful work, other people, meaningful values, not addressing childhood trauma, or disconnect from status and respect.
Disconnecting from nature. We need our exposure to nature to stay well, from our hopeful and secure future. We also have a disconnection from our genetic predisposition, which means we're taking on roles, ideologies perhaps, diets, exercise, things that aren't really our best genetic move, and we're not following what our genes are telling us to follow. As well, changes in the brain do occur, which can lead to depression.
Yeah, and so what can we do about it in protection? Well, we need to know the protective factors. The protective factors are work, people, values, addressing trauma, healthy status, respect, getting outside. That's an easy one, or a simple one, at least for some of us.
True. And then there's the reducing our hope-sucking stimuli, playing to your genetics, as we talked about, and molding your brain where possible, which means you might have to have different input and stimulus. And I tell you what, when we talk about reducing hope-sucking stimuli, some people know what they need to do when that happens. And Ange, we've talked to people, and I've had to do this myself, because there's things that reduce hope in my life right now. One of them is the news, so I've backed away from watching the news.
Yeah. And I have as well. It depends what that news is. And so I tend to go to a little bit more comedy. But anything that kind of sucks my hope, I acknowledge that it is doing that. And then I say, can I shift?
And you made the choice to shift. The next one is the therapeutic lifestyle change. Here's something else we can do. Angellah, this is so massive. This therapeutic lifestyle change is known to be 70% effective in helping people move through their symptoms successfully when they have mild to moderate depression.
Yeah, so physical activity is known now to help the brain release endorphins and dopamine and things like that, taking more omega-3 fatty acids. Sunlight and healthy sleep, we all kind of generally know, but talk about anti-ruminative activity and how it's connected to social connections.
So anti-ruminative activity is quite simply this. When we're ruminating on something, we're brooding, we're thinking about it all the time, and we have a predisposition when we have depression to pursue the thoughts of negativity. It's a human thing that's real for us. So when I'm ruminating on a negative thought, is there a way I can shift from that? One of them is a behavioral activation where I catch myself and I go move or do something different with my physical being.
Mm-hmm. And for some people, it's writing that what they're acknowledging that they may be ruminating on, writing it down, what feelings they're experiencing, and then can I shift my brain into saying, I acknowledge that, this is what I'm experiencing, and can I move forward to maybe a social connection?
Yeah, because as you're talking about it, that's the last thing that helps anti-ruminative activity, connecting with someone socially and talking about what you're thinking about. It's so important. Mm-hmm. Here's something else we can know. And if I have depression, like if I knew how to be happy, I would. People want to be happy.
Yeah.
And the fact is we can't do it all at once. It has to be bite-sized chunks. It's like you can't, Tutu said there's only one way to eat an elephant. It's a bite at a time.
Yeah. Because that person's already suffering, and in some ways, or they may not be feeling like they're suffering, but to let them know, okay, this is real, and it's one step at a time, so that we don't end up overwhelming our already overwhelmed senses.
So we spent a few minutes talking about depression today. This may be our biggest battle, and it's really been a treat to be here with you on Mental Health Mondays. And we hope if you have questions, you will email them into the moderator. I'm Jim Brayshaw.
I'm Angellah, and thank you for taking part in this Mental Health Monday.